Welcome. This is Ken Gosnell with CEO Experience, and today at our CEO conversation, we have Lee Cockerell. Lee was the Executive Vice President of Operations for the Walt Disney Company, and now he is a motivational speaker, keynote speaker, and author. He's written some outstanding books that I highly recommend to every CEO. One of those books is that's entitled The Customer Rules. And we'll be talking about the customer experience today. Lee has led during very difficult times, and he's led a very diverse workforce. And so I'm excited to have Lee with us today. Lee, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good to see you again.
Well, you know, I've got so many questions, and we've gotten some questions from our CEOs today. I really want to talk about the customer experience and what you've learned through your time as a CEO. You know, one of my favorite books that I highly recommend is The Customer Rules. And in that book, you outline the importance of hearing the voice of the customer and working with customers. How did you discover the value of the customer experience?
It's probably my first job was a banquet waiter at the Washington Hilton. And I quickly figured out if you don't take care of the customer, you make less money. So I was the best little waiter they ever had, and I made a lot of money. And but I worked for Hilton, you know, for 8 years, Marriott for 17, and Disney. And really, I think all three of those organizations really are focused on taking care of the customer. That's why they've done so well. They both have about 7,000 hotels now. I don't think I'd want to be in the hotel business right now, but yeah, I learned, you know, I got the right experiences, and I had those bosses and mentors and people who did it the right way, and I had good training, and especially in that kind of early days in the hospitality, you learn by watching and having a difficult boss who makes sure you do it exactly like you're supposed to. So I learned a lot of things I had no idea of. I didn't know anything about service. I came out of Oklahoma. I'd never been anywhere. I was shocked there were so many wine glasses on the table and 6 forks. You know, I said, God, we only had 1 fork at home. But I learned all that. And, you know, I always tell people the way you learn is education, experience, and exposure. And I got a lot of exposure that I wouldn't have had otherwise. And so it was, met a lot of people. I served Lyndon Johnson once. I served Ted Kennedy. I served, you know, they didn't know who I was, but I knew who they were. And you got to really pay attention when these people want to be treated right. And so somebody told me, if you want to make a lot of money, just treat everybody the same. Really good. Don't start anticipating this is going to be a difficult customer. No. And any waiter knows that. Treat everybody the same and you'll make more money than when you start trying to say, well, those people don't look like they're going to tip, or these people or those people. So it's probably a good idea for your whole life, is just treat everybody respectfully and well, and don't worry about that. Sometimes some customers are really difficult and we just let it go. And I said, I'm nice to everybody because they all got a credit card. And so, Mickey likes everybody.
Yeah, I'm wearing my Mickey shirt today.
I see that. Yeah.
Hey, you know, I do love the way that you look at customers, and obviously in all the companies that you mentioned, and even now in your own company, you know, you serve a multitude of people. At Disney, there was, I think, 40,000 or 60,000 employees that you served, a multitude of generations on it, a diverse workforce. Obviously, the hospitality business is important to you. What would you encourage the hospitality? One of the questions I got from a CEO, what would you encourage the hospitality industry to be thinking about right now, coming through this difficult time?
Well, you know, at Disney, we have 4 things we focus all our decisions on, and the first one's always safety. I mean, that's it. Any decision, you think safety first. If you get by that one, then you go down to courtesy, and then you go down to show how the place looks, is everything where it's supposed to be, and last, efficiency. And we try to teach all our leaders and people to make decisions that way, especially, you know, at Disney, 50% of our business is children. And if somebody's child gets hurt, you're in trouble, because there's nothing parents worry about more than their children's safety. So I would say short term, as we try to reopen America, is really overdo it on the safety. and try to meet people where they are. You're going to have individuals that are all coming from a different place. You're going to have people who are just fine coming in. You're going to have others that are afraid to get out of the car. You're going to have others that are older. I mean, you never still know emotionally where people are about their health and about what they're thinking. You know, the brain absorbs all this news and information, and some people handle it well, and other people become very cautious. So I'd say try to think about anything that any customer, and you could, and I told 2 groups this week, start talking to your customers. What do you expect from us when we reopen? And you're going to get half a dozen things, you know, the whole story. Somebody's going to say, well, at the doctor, I'll wait in the car and you call me when my appointment's done. Somebody else is going to say, yeah, I want to buy that, but I'll pull up and you bring it out and hand it to me. And other people are just going to come in, and I think you're going to have to be clear. And I think it'll probably need to be visible that you're aware that this is, whether it's signage or whether it's any other way you can show that only 12 people at a time are allowed in the store or whatever. And it's more about everybody's mentally coming from a different place on this. You can be sure of that. Depends how old they are. It depends on their health. It depends on many things. So I would say that we always talk about at Disney, treat people as individuals, not as groups. You know, we say all old people or all young people. Now, it's each person is different, and you don't know where they are, and they'll be impressed if you ask them, what are your expectations for what are you worried about? What can we do to make you feel more comfortable about this? And then you try to take care of those the best you can. Yeah.
I love that, treating in each person individually. And I'm going to come back to that customer experience one more time around your book that I highly recommend, but you touched on something that I think is important, as you talked about health and you know, personal health and people considering their health. I know as an executive, one of the things we've talked about and you talk about specifically is that you're very focused on your own individual health. We'll get a little bit more into that a little bit later, but you plan that time, you block time out. When you go to a doctor, you plan the next visit. Can you talk a little bit about a leader's health and why?
Yeah, I think 2 things. I'm OCD, and I don't want to miss things, and I want to be reliable because it's your reputation. And certainly, my wife and I exercise. You know, our gym closed, so we're doing it online. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, we do strength training, agility, and balance training. I've been working on this for 12 years because at this point, bone density becomes important when we get older. We don't want to fall and break a hip, you know. So some things, and do we like it? No, we hate our trainer. He's a pain in the neck. He pushes us really hard, but you know, before you do it, you don't like it. And when you're done, you're glad you did it. And it pays off. I always tell people the things you need to be working on are things that'll pay off later. Exercise pays off later. Not smoking pays off later. Eating right pays off later, you know. So it's kind of a philosophy I got out of dealing with the time management of thinking about, are you dealing with the things that are really important for you, short-term and long-term? And so I think about those things, and they're hard because people don't like to do hard things. So everybody's got the same time, but some people don't have time. And when I retired, my wife said, Lee, your new priorities are take care of yourself so you can take care of us. And it's true. If you don't take care of yourself, you're tired, you procrastinate, you put things off, you don't feel like doing it. So she said, take care of yourself. Second, then you can take care of your family because you're here. And third, take care of your business and whatever else is interesting to you. And then if you have time left over, you can help Kim Kardashian with her problems. But other than that, don't be wasting your time on stupid stuff that makes no difference. And most of us just shy away from difficult things, difficult conversations, difficult decisions, because they're hard. But until you get in the habit of pushing through them, I tell everybody, including your listeners, everybody's got 2 or 3 problems they've been putting off for years. You ought to pick one, and then over the next month, make it go away. And it may be brutal, having a hard conversation with somebody, changing a routine. I mean, it'll be hard, but that's one thing I had to learn because I had the same problem. I didn't know how to discipline people. I didn't know how to have hard conversations with them. I was a young kid. And then I got in a management job, which is a lot of your responsibility, if not all, is it's about people. And my boss told me once, if you don't take care of that guy, Lee, I'm going to take care of you. That got my attention. And so and sometimes you got to have hard conversations with your children, or it's just, we all know what we should be doing, but we're not always doing it. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. There's still some hard things I don't really want to do, but I don't cancel my workouts. I just go ahead and do them and suffer.
Yeah, you do a good job of dealing with those hard things. I challenge, seriously, and I've challenged leaders every month to think about what's one problem that they're trying to solve. And the idea of that is at least asking at least each month, what's something that I've been working on that I really need to solve this.
And you can get help. If you can't do it yourself, get somebody to help you. Get a friend. That's why we have the trainer, because, we got an appointment, and we have to pay him whether we show up or not. So we show up. When you have appointments for things, you tend to show up with them, versus I'll work out when I feel like it. When is that going to be?
Right.
The couch is way too close. So.
Hey, Danielle had a follow-up question on that real quick, so I'll unmute Danielle so she can ask that question for you.
Yeah.
Danielle, are you there? I can't hear you. Sorry.
I'm sorry. Hi, Lee. Thank you for doing this with us. Thank you, Ken. My name is Danielle Davis. So you talked about having those hard conversations, and my team feels like I'm too nice, and that in some cases I've been taken advantage of. So can you talk about some practical steps to having those conversations?
Yeah, I think I tell people two things you really need to be a leader, and or a parent or mother. I'm sure you're tough on your kid. You have children? I'm sure they think you're tough because you kick their butt and then you tell them you love them. And the two things that are important in life, any leadership job, is empathy and discipline. You got to have both. If you're just a nice person, you will get taken advantage of. And if you just have discipline and no empathy, people think you're a jerk. And you already know how to do it. You do it every day with your children, and mothers are the best at it. And you just got to transfer that to the businesses. It's for them. It's not for you. If people report to you, shame on you for not helping them understand what they need to do so they can have a good career. Better training, better tell them things they should hear that nobody's told them. And the way I just do it is I schedule the time. I don't even know. Sometimes I write in my day planner, I got a problem with Bob in my office, and I just write in there tomorrow, fix Bob. And I bring Bob in and we just go at it. And I say, listen, the reason you're in here is here's the problem. The way you speak to people in meetings is not appropriate. Are you going to get fired over that? Maybe, maybe not. But it's going to hurt your career. And I'm here for you. This is not for me. I'm here for you. And I think that's what we don't think about is that it's a responsibility. And so I would say after you talk to me today and we talk about this, I hope you feel really bad when you don't do what you're supposed to do because you're being irresponsible. So, and we all have those regrets. We should have done it. I wish I'd have spent more time with my son. I wish I had gotten involved in that when he was having trouble, regrets. But once you get in the habit of doing it, and I even tell people today, if you're going to discipline somebody, you don't need to plan a big meeting. It shouldn't take very long. If somebody's coming to work late and they're not doing their job, or they're not treating people properly, or they're telling inappropriate jokes, when you see them, you just say, hey, step in my office for a minute. You don't even let them sit down. You just say, hey, John, you can't talk to people like that in the meeting. Do you understand? And have you noticed that? And he says, yes. I said, well, it can't happen anymore. And if it does, you're not going to be here. But we love you, and you are a good performer, and we hope you can turn this around. That's it. Have a good day. And, mothers don't plan a big meeting. They kick you right when it happens. Right? Right?
We tried. Right.
When your kid runs in the streets, you don't wait for their annual review.
Right.
You deal with it. And I had the same problem. I couldn't do it. And you just start doing it. It's like anything. The longer you do it, the better you get at it. And you start to feel and understand that it's a good thing you're doing. It's not bad. Because if you don't do it, you'll be responsible for that person failing or not doing what they're supposed to do. Because most people think they're perfect, especially men. Especially men. I tell my wife all the time, it's not my fault. Well, I quit saying that because she doesn't buy that. So you've got to just step up, because those people's future is in your hands. Just like your children. Your children, if it's screwed up, it's your fault. Don't blame the teachers. Don't blame your grandfather. You know, you own it.
Right. Hey, you've gone from leading to meddling now. I can't. You're stealing one of my favorite comments to my wife. It's not my fault. So now
right. I mean, you can try it, but it doesn't work very well.
Hey, I love your statement. You're referencing it. You say lead like a mother. And
exactly. Lead like a mother, because mothers, mothers have a long-term vision. They know when you're born, and they've got 18 to 20 years to get you ready for real life, and to have good ethics and honesty, and to do the right thing, and to treat people right. And so along the way, I didn't like my mother for about 3 or 4 years when I was a teenager. I thought she was mean. And then I ended up with kids and had to be mean. So, it's just, but, nobody likes to do these difficult things. It's just easy to walk away and hope it gets better. And hoping and wishing doesn't work. You got to step in there and be the leader. I tell people, if you can't have hard conversations and make hard decisions, number 1, don't have children. Number 2, don't become a leader. Because it's nothing else in your life is going to be a problem except people. People create all your problems. It's never the product. I had a talk with Tyson Foods a few years ago. I told the CEO, remember this, it's not the chickens. We know what's going to happen to the chickens. All your problems are going to be people. And we get too focused sometimes on the wrong things, because it's easier to deal with the product. Product's not emotion. I can't speak back. It can't disappoint you. But it's somebody, and if you got a bad product, somebody in your organization created that, and you're dealing with the wrong thing, and you're not going to get it better till you start to figure out somebody along the line, and maybe you, because you weren't clear, or you didn't tell people, or you don't have high expectations for excellence, or whatever. I'd say mostly it's our fault. Most of my problems in my life have been my fault. Sometimes the company, but mostly me.
Well, you talked about the keys of the kingdom earlier from a clarity standpoint, and I think Disney and Walt was the one that started those keys of the kingdom of safety first, and then courtesy and kindness around. Can you talk a little bit about, and you used to write from a communication standpoint, what Main Street Diaries, where you were communicating to the team consistently around those keys to the kingdom and your expectations of a leader. Can you share a little bit more about how important it is that the leader knows what those visions?
I mean, I wrote that newsletter back in the day. If I was doing it today, it'd be a podcast to all the cast members. And in fact, my son, who was at Disney and the VP of the Magic Kingdom before he left a couple of years ago to do his own thing, he did a 7-8 minute podcast every Friday night, went out to 12,000 employees and his managers. So there's nothing like people hearing your voice. That's really powerful. And 7-8 minutes, people can listen to it on the way to work, on their phone. There's no reason not to communicate these days with people. And to be clear, here's what I want you to focus on this week. Whatever it is, I want let's really get on this sanitation, or let's really pay attention to the older folks this week, or let's really pay attention to the children, and reminding people, just like mothers never go away. They tell you the same thing 1,000 times. And that's because you can't get bored with the basics. Really, the basics are what make you who you are. Ethics, honesty, being reliable, credible, keeping your promises. Those are the things. It's not your education. Educated people get in trouble all the time because they have bad behavior. And so we need to go find their mother and find out what happened. So, manage like a mother and you'll be fine. I always tell people, anytime you have a big problem in your business or your life, just call your mom. She'll tell you what to do. She knows. Right? It's true. Mothers know. My mother was a terrorist before they had them in the world. You know, she was like, kick our butt, man. And now we appreciate her. She taught us discipline. And my grandmother taught us empathy. She was the nicest person I ever knew. So you need both of those in your life. There's a time to use one, a time to use the other. And if you get those two, you'll probably be pretty successful.
I love the idea of thoughtfulness, and even what you're talking about with, you know, having that long-term vision. One of the things that I love about your book, The Customer Rules, is you outline in the book how you and Disney had really put yourself from a thoughtfulness perspective, in the mind of the customer. And you write in detail about what you want every customer that comes into Disney to experience, from before they even come, as they're packing up to leave. Can you talk a little bit about kind of that?
That will be a course in the next week or 10 days. We redeveloped it into how you can write your own story for your business, because I wrote the story of what I wished it would look like at every interaction, every transaction, getting on a bus, getting off a bus, checking in, checking out, going in your room, picking up the phone. And I published that back in '95, I think it was. And so that all the cast members at Disney could see the same story that we each won. The bus driver now knows, okay, that's got to be great. Getting on an attraction, buying an ice cream cone, it's got to be great. Everything matters. And so we wrote that. I think the course is going to be $29 something. And it comes with a little workbook. You can write your own story. Even in Customer Rules, we said, be your own Shakespeare. Write your story. And then bring it to life. And most people don't have the full story written in their mind, so they don't see it when they're in their business. They don't. If you know what should be happening, then you'll see it. If you don't know and haven't thought it all the way through, you will. And I think this time of reopening is a good time to rethink. If you were opening your business today, what changes would you make? Physically and training and attitude and clarity of expectations. This is a perfect time. It's kind of a reopen. We're going to start over, guys. And because you're going to have to be great to beat everybody out, because, you know, good friend of mine was over this morning, good restaurant we used to go to up in Minneapolis, just closed forever. I mean, and the ones that are going to hopefully get open are going to have to really produce. And I mean, there's going to be an attitude problem for a while about not putting up with. There's going to be a lot of empty seats. There's going to be a lot of, you know, attracting business is going to be difficult. And so that's how I wrote that it was called The Perfect Visit to Disney. From the time you call up the first time and the lady at reservations talks to you, that's the first interaction. Maybe the first interaction is the commercial you saw on TV. And then the second one, you make the call. And then, I mean, and the average guest comes to Disney, calls 4 or 5 times, because this is a big deal. They're spending a lot of money. And then the kids see something, a water park on TV, and then they call and they want to book that. And then they want to book. So we talk to our guests a lot. And we've got to have people on those phones that have empathy, because sometimes the guests want to talk to you about their father who's sick. I mean, you know, American Express did a lot of training with their people, and that's why you call their call centers. They're amazing. They did empathy training. Empathy. That's all. Listen to the customer. If they want to talk about their dad, talk about it, you know? So empathy, ask your wife if she likes you telling her you love her, and you do all the time. I know, because I see your posts, and that's why you're still married. And I've been married 51 years, and so I'm doing a pretty good job. Yeah. My wife said she's going to stay. So she didn't always say that when I was misbehaving. So it matters. Empathy matters. You know, you just think about it. Every person you work with is different. Some are going through a divorce. Some got problems. Some got health problems. You got to, good leaders working their way through that. And if you got 2 or 3 children, they're different. I mean, girls are different than boys, by the way, if you didn't know that. Yeah. So we found that out in our family, and they need to be talked to differently. They need, people are wired differently. It's, you know, I don't know where it comes from, but it's in the same family. We know you got to treat people as individuals, because their age matters. And older people are different than younger people, and people that grew up in another country and were poor are different than the person who grew up on Fifth Avenue. I mean, you got to really be thinking about individuals. That's what I just keep pounding all the time. Where's this person coming from? What can I do? I need to learn more about them so I can help them, because in America, people don't tell you the truth. When I say, how you doing? What do they say? Great. That's the biggest lie in America. People are not doing great. People are having a disaster. We've got to get out. Any other country in the world, they tell you how they're doing. Not here in Canada. We say, oh, we're great. And about 40, I don't know how many percentage of people are suffering from anxiety and depression around the country. And they need to be heard, and they need to be paid attention. And I always tell people, what is the most important thing every parent wants for their kids? Two things: safety, education. Yep. That's it. That's all we think about. Safety, education. And true. Yeah, it's true. And it's true at Disney, and it's true if I go to a restaurant. I want safety. I want good, safe food. I want the waiter to know what they're doing. They've been educated. They know what So train your people and make the customers safe. And the customers notice. They notice. And they are going to really notice safety when we start to reopen. Yeah. You're not going to be getting away with just blowing it off.
I agree.
Even if it's just for the visual, just visually. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to promote that class when you come out. I want everybody to take, because so many companies, for real, because so many companies don't think through what you walk through, and just thinking about a perfect experience. What does that look like as it relates to each pivot point that a customer interacts with our company? So I think it's one of the things that I loved about the book. So, hey, this leads to a question though. Can you train, we'll talk about happiness in a second, because I loved what you talk about with Disney being one of the happiest places in the world, but can you train empathy, or do you hire empathetic people? What's your take on that?
I think generally we look for the right attitude and passion and that empathy that we don't trying to find somebody and teach them to be kind and nice. No, we're looking for the person that's already nice, and that we're not too worried about the skill, because that's training. But even if you find a person that's highly educated, they're really good at what they do, and they got a bad behavior, no, we keep looking until we find the person that's really skilled, but they got a good attitude and they want to do this job. They're passionate, because there's a lot of stress at Disney and any job. The customers can be brutal, and they want it now. And they want if kids don't see Cinderella or Mickey Mouse, they call my office and work me over. Parents are the most important thing for a parent in the world is for their kids to be happy. That's it. If you don't make the kids happy, you're really you're in trouble. And anybody doesn't understand that, make my kids happy. One guy told me from New York, I hate Disney. I said, why? I hate those lines. I hate coming down here. New Yorker, I can't wait. He said, but if my kids are happy when I go home, then I'm happy. I remember that. Because what makes us happier than our kids being happy? I don't care how old you get. My son's 51 years old, and I still want him to be happy.
And Dan actually just released his book.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
I'm excited about it as well. Yeah, that's fantastic. Hey, let's talk about happiness for a second, because I know you as a leader, you talk about, hey, Disney has this culture of happiness, but you have to remind people, because life isn't always easy, and sometimes when they come to work, they're not always happy. And I did some work with the hospitality industry some years ago, and I was really shocked when I found out that the hospitality industry in itself has the highest turnover rate of all industries in America.
Yeah.
And they have the greatest levels of depression among their executives and leaders. Sure. And I started to ask why, and it's because you're dealing with a whole new clientele almost every day. Because the 1,000 of complaints that you heard yesterday, it comes in, different people have different perspectives, right? So how do you remain, or what did you teach your employees at Disney about remaining happy, and how did you get happy sometimes when you weren't happy when you came to work?
Yeah, I think the thing you got to think about, whether you're at Disney or you're a dentist's office or you're a airline or a convenience store, basically you got to have the mindset you're putting on a show. That's it. The curtain opens when your store opens, and you've got to have this mindset that you've hired the right people. They're going to represent you well. You know, when we talk about the way the place looks, that's how the stage is. It's clean, no cigarette butts. You come in, people greet you from behind the counter. How are you, sir? Good today. Nice to have you here. I think having standards and knowing you're putting on a show, because your goal is consistency. You want a reputation, and we know companies that do it. There's certain places, you know, if you stop at that brand. I do a lot of work with Love's travel stops. I don't know if you've ever stopped at one, but they actually are amazing. I mean, I think Love's is the right name for them, because I stop at them occasionally and they're all the same. Chick-fil-A, consistency. I don't know if everybody loves working there, but they act like it. And that's the problem. I say Disney's the happiest place on earth or else, because it's what we do. We're professionals. We are clear that we're putting on a hit show, maybe the most visited show in the world. And every guest has got to have a great experience. And we've hired you to play that role. And so you're the leading lady. You got an argument with your boyfriend today. Well, you're going to have to tuck that away, because you got to go on stage, be great. And then you can be unhappy when you get off stage. And we think happiness is a personal problem, really. And you've got to hold people accountable for performance. And I think when you think about happiness being a personal issue, we got to help people when we can to get over that. But otherwise, you got to have high expectations, hold people accountable. And everybody has problems. We all have obstacles every single day, but professionals go do it. And, you know, mothers who know what they're trying to do and be the right role model and set the right example for their kids, withhold their anger and don't scream and yell and say inappropriate things and scare the children. And even though you want to sometimes, you just don't do it. And that's the work. And as we just talk about it a lot.
Right.
We talk about it. It's become part of the culture. And people want to be proud of where they work. You know, at the end of the day, there's a lot of people that work at Disney probably not happy. They don't make enough money, but they're proud to work there. And even if they leave, that always serves them well down the road. When somebody saw they worked for Disney, they want to hire them. So it becomes, you set the culture up the way you want it, and you hire the people who want to do it. And some people don't want to do it. They need to go somewhere else, because just think about when you put on your show every day, have you got all the right people, the right training, the right rehearsals, the right props, the right cleanliness? Is everything ready to go? It's kind of like an airplane taking off. Go through the checklist. I don't want the guy to check the flaps after we crash, you know. Check it out. Make sure everything's right before you open. Right. And we at Disney, we meet with all the staff every shift before we start, every department. And we talk to them about it. Okay, guys, remember today, we got to really be careful, because people are really worried about this today. Really pay attention to the children. You got to keep rehearsing people because people come to work with problems. But, well, we got to, and I do too. I mean, I had to go in every day and be nice and be kind, and I couldn't go around, you know, no. And it's a state of mind. You know, excellence is really a state of mind. If you want to be great, you'll be great. If you don't think it's important, you won't. And I tell people, don't underestimate the impact you have on people every day. Each of us. Impact on strangers, people, work. And don't underestimate what you can achieve in your life, because people come to you with all kinds of problems. Insecurity, they grew up in a poor family, they didn't have a chance. And sometimes we got to take them and remold them, and for the better. Yeah.
I like your book, Creating Magic. Obviously, it's one of my favorite books. I highly recommend every leader read this book, and obviously the customer rules. You know, one of the things that I appreciate about you, Lee, is, and you just mentioned, you know, problems and difficulties, and life is full of them. And you're very authentic. You went through a time of your own personal situation where your wife was sick, and you went to a level of depression, and you're very authentic about it. And I think it's something that relates to every leader. Can you share just a little bit about that?
Yeah.
Period?
My wife got very sick a few years ago, had diverticulitis, had a failed bowel resection surgery. Before it was over, she was in the hospital 64 days. The bill was $700,000. Luckily, I still had Disney insurance. I think they wish I'd have left earlier. But it was brutal. I mean, day and night hiring healthcare workers to come in. I mean, and it lasted almost 18 months. And I eventually ended up with anxiety and depression. Anxiety first, and then depression set in because I couldn't sleep. I lost 25 pounds. I didn't want to eat. All I sat around, and Priscilla pushed me. She was getting better and I was getting worse. And I went to see a psychiatrist and he really helped me. So he helped me go back and probably figure out, he really diagnosed me as fearing abandonment. Because when I was a little kid, we lived with my grandmother, and my mother took me away from her, and my mother being married 5 times, and God knows how screwed up I am. And he said, you know, when you take a 2 or 3 or 4-year-old away from somebody that's really important to them in their life, your brain records that as they've been abandoned. And she said, when you thought your wife was going to die, it's probably that came rushing back. And I've told my whole family to behave themselves. My grandkids, I said, listen, I don't deal with personal things very well. Business things don't bother me at all. But if you get kids get in trouble, you're going to kill me. So, and I know I'm susceptible to going back to there. So I saw a psychologist every Monday. I saw a psychiatrist. I got acupuncture. I exercised every day. I quit watching TV, listened to music. My one psychologist told me just sit and worry about everything once a day. So when you wake up at 3 a.m, like when you do, you'll have already been through that issue. You'll have kind of resolved it in your mind. I mean, I meditated. I got one of those apps. I mean, I took caffeine and alcohol and sugar out of my diet. Everything affects it. And I eventually got better. It took me a long time. So I thought I was the last person in the world, whatever. I'm tough. Nothing bothers Lee. I've been there. I've done it. And man, I used to think about people with depression. I'd say, what's their problem? Why don't they get their act together? Boy, did I get slapped upside the head. And now I can spot it a mile away. People, you know, they don't want to see you. They're remote. They don't call you back. And people put on a good face, but I didn't. I just told everybody, I said, you know, I'm crazy right now. So just be careful. You know, I don't want to see you. I don't want to have coffee with you. I couldn't concentrate at all. I couldn't concentrate on anything. And then you go to Google and it makes it worse because you Google it. Dr. Google tells you you're never going to get better. But I did. So I would say only in the last 6 months have I been probably 100% again. But I'm always aware that be careful because, you know, I've got this issue about somebody abandoning me. So I'm really nice to my wife now.
Well, I think your story is so profound because, you know, for a couple of reasons. One is that, you know, it happened to you later in life on a situation that you didn't expect or didn't see it coming necessarily. And, you know,
I was 65 when it happened.
Right. And we as leaders, we don't know sometimes what comes, and all of a sudden we don't always understand why things are happening or what happened.
Right.
And then
I tell people half the stuff in your brain's not true, but it'll come back and visit you when you least expect it and cause you to think things that aren't true either. Right. Also told people half the stuff your parents taught you is not true either. So be careful what you're thinking about.
But the attack that you went on to go say that you could have said, hey, I'm tough Lee, I'm 65, I ran Disney World and I've done all these things and I'll just muscle my way through it. And what you did was you really said, hey, let me develop a plan. Let me reach out. Let me find out who can help me during this time. And it won't get better unless you fight it. I mean, unless you go get professional help and fight it on it, it'll get worse. You know, that's what happens to a lot of men. I do a lot of work for the military around the world, and the same problem. Men don't want to go for help. So they drink too much, sleep too much, abuse, alcohol, drugs. And eventually you're stuck. And I always tell people, when you got a problem, go get professional help. You know, there's somebody out there can help you. And I had a lot of people that did. But it was still hard. It was very difficult to overcome it because of that chemical change in your brain. Mm-hmm. And my brain was not being nice to me. Well, one of the questions I just got, and maybe you can give a little bit more, they said that, you know, as leaders, we go through bouts of depression at different times as we go through difficult situations in our business. There's bouts of depression. How did you know when it was at that tipping point where you needed help?
I got to where I became isolated. I didn't want to meet with anybody. And it was a time when I'd go out for coffee every morning, a group of guys. I was meeting people. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to do any of my presentations. I canceled most of my work for a year. Anxiety was so high. I went to Australia to give a speech, and a year later they hired me again. And I said, I didn't even remember giving the speech. I was taking Xanax, and I said, do you have a video of that? And they sent it to me, and it was one of the best speeches I ever gave. I don't remember one thing about it because anxiety was so high. I didn't think I could get through it. And let me tell you, now I know. I would tell anybody, I don't care what your problem is or your children's problem. There's somebody out there can help you. And don't be embarrassed, because it's brutal, and it'll ruin the rest of your life if you don't deal with it. Next thing you know, it'll ruin your family, your kids, your health. And so I've really never had a problem of kind of, I didn't care what anybody thought. I just needed to get better. And so I sat on the couch. I didn't do anything, just moped around. And when you can't sleep, that's the beginning and the end. Let me tell you, when you can't sleep, and that's really takes you down, where you're totally wiped out every day, and it just goes from bad to worse. And so most people can be aware of it, but sometimes Priscilla noticed it more. My daughter-in-law said, I knew Lee was in trouble when he said he didn't even care if he saw his grandkids this week. You know, I mean, people put off signs and messages to you. And if you pay attention and know your people really well and your kids really well, you'll see when, something's not right. And so, especially teenagers, I don't believe anything they say. So always go check. I said, you hear these mothers say, I didn't know my daughter was on drugs. I said, really? Not very. Or I didn't know my son was building a bomb in his room. If you have teenagers, you should go in their room every 20 minutes, find out what's going on in there, because anything could happen. And so I learned a lot going through that, because I used to just think it was an attitude problem. It's not an attitude problem. And yeah.
Hey, thank you for sharing that. Hey, I know that we've got a few more minutes left. If you got a question, please send it to me and I'll ask Lee, or you can ask if you're on video yourself. I know you led Disney through some pretty difficult times. You had to shut down for a hurricane that was coming in. How do companies make decisions during difficult times, or what best advice could you give us around
Well,
this?
I'd say, again, the first one I had was a hurricane. The biggest one was 9/11. And I think, again, going back to safety first, and having that responsibility for people's lives. We do simulations at Disney 2 or 3 times a year. Through a crisis, a company puts us through it. You might get a call at 3 a.m. You might get a call at 4 p.m. You got to open the command center within a half an hour. We have 22 command centers on property, and everybody gets in place, and we start making decisions, and depends what it is. And we've done so many simulations. The morning of 9/11, within 30 minutes, I had the parks closed. An hour and a half later, we had everybody evacuated, because that's what we do. We know how to do it. Everybody did their job. We all knew what to do. It's kind of like buy a fire extinguisher before you have a kitchen fire, or put a pool fence around your pool before a child drowns. And we really anticipate hurricanes. We don't get ready the night before. We have all the plywood. And we have a whole procedure for shutting the property down, moving. In May, we have the month of May is cleanup, when anything could blow around is removed, put away. We have all the sandbags already made year round. We have the plywood. We just put the procedure in place. And you can do that at home. You can do it in a small business. You always see these videos of everybody at Home Depot, the night before the hurricane. And I'm going like, what? If you live in Florida, it's going to happen. And if you're in a business, it's just a matter of time until you have a crisis. And it could be a fire. It could be a first aid. It could be just training your people that can do CPR. It could be anticipate what can happen in your life and prepare for it and hope it never happens. Mm-hmm. And I always told my wife, make sure I keep her up to date on CPR. And I told her, always call the ambulance before you start working on me in case you don't know what you're doing. But be ready. Just anticipation is one of the most powerful things. Anticipate what can happen in any situation. If you got teenage kids, mothers, anticipate. If they got a daughter, anticipate. And you focus on those things. I mean, we all grew up, and as I said, there's a lot of things my mother doesn't know and she shouldn't know. But it helped me know that I have children and they're going to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So anticipation about getting ready for the future so you'll do it well, and reflection about the past, what you didn't do so well, so you do it better the next time. So I always think every morning about, okay, yesterday, could I have done that better? Should I have said this? You know, and then I'm thinking about things right now, anticipating my business. I'm keeping in touch with my customers right now. I'm doing things like this, just if they want me to. I'm talking to college and high school students around the country that are sitting at home, and the professor wants me to teach the course for the day. So, and I do it too, because I get something out of it. This is fun, more fun than sitting down in my office and looking out the window, you know?
Hey, one of the questions that I received was around the processes that Disney puts into place. And, you know, I love your idea about anticipation. Is how radical would you recommend a small business thinking about their processes? And the question specifically was around, how do you really implement good processes? Is it through practice and simulation, or how do you get everybody involved in understanding the process?
Yeah, well, I would say, again, you kind of go through those areas. Is it a safety issue? You got to have good processes for that before you open an attraction. Food safety, temperatures. I mean, we check all the temperatures frequently, and then those are recorded. We can't have foodborne illness breaks at Disney. I mean, that can't happen because children and people, that's the last thing you want to see on the newspaper. So safety is a big one, where we have lots of procedures and policies around it. And then we have whatever, it could be courtesy training. We have it, you know. And when you call Disney before they hang up, they say, have a magical day. That's not, they don't just do that because they happen to. They do it because they better do it, because that's part of the training. And our guests like that. And you also, I think, talk to your customers, and your employees know everything you need to know. Mm-hmm. So if you sit down and ask them, what do we need to have a better procedure here? Maybe it's how you sign up for vacation. Maybe it's how you, whatever it is. And if you need one, you create it, and then you communicate it to everybody, and that's how you get consistency. It's the same old story. And it can be about anything from friendliness to courtesy to safety to efficiency. You know, we have standards on overtime. We have standards on how many people are on the shift, how many hours, because we got to run that bottom line too. You know, we got the guest, the cast, and the bottom line. And that's three tough issues, because you can never make a perfect decision. You just kind of make the best you can. And so Disney is very focused on, there's a Disney way to do it, and you better do it that way. Right. It's like in the military. When I was in the Army, there's an Army way. They're not interested in your opinion. So, and your own company, you need to have your way, so that you're recognized from your customers. Boy, they got their act together. And that's what some's visible and some's not visible. There's some things you have in place so that nothing ever happens. Right. You know,
one of my favorite stories you tell about processes and educating your people. You tell a story about one of the restaurants in Disney World that ran out of trays one day. And can you tell that story real quick?
Yeah, I was working out. We go out and work in the busy times. All the executives, finance, marketing, everybody goes out into the operations, because we can't staff up enough at Christmas and Easter. So we all go out, and I was working in a quick service place, serving Coca-Colas and putting them on the trays. And all of a sudden we started running out of trays. And it went from bad to worse. The trays started getting hot, and then it started not being washed. And then we were out, and there was probably, 500 people on different lines waiting for their food. And I had a blue smock on that we wore when we worked out there. And one guest yelled at me and said, hey, boy, what's going on? I said, I don't know, sir. It's my first day. I'm going to get the manager for you. I didn't tell him I run this place, and I had no idea. So we put a new procedure in. We started inventorying all the trays every Friday morning, making sure we never ran out again. Because what happens, mom and the kids go get a table and dad's got there and there's 4 burger baskets and 4 drinks. If you don't have a tray, forget it. Nothing happens. You talk about a little thing, a tray. And I told people, you better go back and get to know your tray washer back there. He might be a serial killer, but he's important. And, just be nice to him, because he apparently is the one person who could stop this whole operation. Bingo,
Yeah, I love that story. Hey, Mark had a question for you as it relates to kind of that Disney way. Mark, can you ask your question for Lee?
Sure. Hey, Lee. I actually worked for Disney for about 10 years under Barry Jacobson, so it's good to see you again.
I see Barry frequently.
And I see him all the time. We talk a lot, so good to see you. But anyway, my question is, I'm now the CEO of a Chamber of Commerce. And one of the things that I remember in my time at Disney was, we were really good. We all bought into the magic of Disney. And so we all worked to do the right thing for the guests. What challenges I see our businesses are dealing with is the fact that they get their employees more look at their job as a job. They're not buying into what the organization is. That's the owner. It's all about the owner's vision. I'm just doing this as a job. What would you tell to those business owners to say, this is how you get them to buy into, your belief system?
Yeah, I'd go back to that. If I was running any one of those businesses, I would probably run it the same way I do now. I would be involved in that business. I would be involved in the hiring. I would be so clear with my expectations. If you want to work here, here's what we're trying to do. I will help you with training and development so you can have a bigger career down the road. You're going to get more out of this being here with me than you are just a job. I tell people all the time, go up and find the best juniors and seniors in high school and make them a promise that they can make a little money, work for you. And by the time they graduate, they will have learned some things about that business, and you'll teach them the financial state. You'll do whatever you want to do. And I think the thing is, be available. It's about the same story. Hire the right people, train them, tell them how much you appreciate them. This is not the thing. A lot of kids today, the manager or the owner doesn't even know the kid's last name. They don't know their aspirations. They don't know what they're trying to achieve. And kids don't understand there's more to work. That's the experience they're getting, which is going to pay off down the road. And they ought to hear things like this, experience, exposure, education. Make sure people are going to know that work for me, that I am going to take care of them emotionally. I'll be available if they have a problem. I'm going to know your name. I'm going to know what you're trying to do. If you have a problem, you come and see me. I'll help you, because turnover is brutal. And the other thing that's brutal in a business is not having people committed, because they steal from you. They're not unproductive. When you're not around, they're screwing around. But if I am committed to you, you don't need to be around. And I'll do the job. I'll take care of your business. If you show respect and inclusiveness, help me and teach me and show, same as Priscilla said, if you love me, tell me. Well, if you appreciate your people, you've got to make sure they know that every day. A lot of these kids are coming from families where they're insecure. They have no self-esteem. They don't believe in themselves. They don't have any thoughts about going to college. They don't know what's possible in the future. You got to I love to take people and make them totally committed to me, because that's like my grandkids. I have 3 grandchildren who like me better than their parents. See, so why? Because I'm always available. I don't care. Anytime you can call me, I'll help you get out of trouble. I'll help you develop the story to tell your parents, because your dad did it and I did it. And, we're totally committed. We tell, you just it's gotta be more than the job. If I don't think, if the people don't feel like the boss is committed to them, they're not going to be committed to him. And you build that through dealing and talking to people. And when they're doing a good job, telling them, and you're doing great. And here's a book for you to read. And I want to teach you, I told one company, maybe Wednesday nights, I'll have a class for an hour and I'll teach you guys something different every week, so that when you go back to school, you'll already understand finance better, or whatever. When you show interest in people, that's what we all want. I want a place where I matter. And at Disney, that was one of our things, to have a place where everybody matters and they know it. And you got to tell them. It's like, don't keep it to yourself, because people are fragile. And people that learn these things go in. I get it all the time. Somebody will say, I started practicing some of that stuff I read in your books, Lee, and it worked. I mean, I'm sure of course it works. It's just that we get so busy, and a lot of owners, they grew up the hard way. They don't know. Their father was tough, and it's just these young kids working are a problem. And no. And you got to really step back, and you got to be the leader. You may be their father or mother, frankly, in a lot of these jobs. And yeah, I mean, it's a same old story. You got to build the relationship, and people got to know that you care about them. And if you care about me, I'll be all over it for you. I'll take care of you. And there are companies that do it. Look around. Look at these Chick-fil-A's. Look at Disney. Look at Marriott. Look at there's stores in your town that are doing it. And there's stores that aren't. Right. And everybody knows which stores they are. And it's the reason people love it is because the people, how they feel, how they get treated, people know what they're doing. You go in the hardware store and the guy knows what he's doing, and so it's the same old story. It's just a way of changing the way you think. Now, is it take more time? Sure, but it pays off big time. Mm-hmm. And so hire them right, train them right, treat them right, make sure they know they have a future. You're going to help them. And you may be the person that's more important than you may be treating them better than their parents do. Or, best thing you can do for people is build their self-esteem and self-confidence and make them feel good about themselves. And that fuel, I know that. I mentor some kids now that they're in tough neighborhoods. They have nothing. And I help them get enrolled in college. I help them work on getting a free scholarship because their income level, and I stay on top of it so they don't drop out. And I call them and I harass them, and so it's just, if you gotta share the love and share the empathy and the discipline to help people know there's a reason. It's not a job. It's learning. It's experience. It's exposure. It's going to pay off for you. That's why kids that come and work at Disney when they're 18, that pays off for them later. I mean, they go into a place to get a job, and then somebody sees Disney on there. They say, "Hey, well, okay, let me talk to this person. What can you do for us?" So it's a lot about. It's not the kids needing to change; it's the owner.
Well, one of the questions that we got, and I think you just answered it, was around how to deal with younger employees and bring them in. And you just talked about that interest and loving on them, and even your idea about going into the high schools in our local communities and saying, hey, juniors and seniors, come work with our company for a little bit. We'll educate you in a particular area.
Even if they only work 1 or 2 days a week and you got 3 or 4 of them, or just on week, I mean, those people could work with you for 3 or 4 years. And yeah. So
we just have a minute or two left, Lee, and I just
by the way, old people are good too.
Absolutely. One of the things I love about Disney is you have that generational model where a lot of times you have an older
absolutely
retired person with a younger person.
They're great. They have a good influence on the younger people too. Yeah.
Real quick, I know we're just about out of time, but I wanted to have just a minute or so. Obviously, time management is extremely important. You wrote a book on time management as well, and you have a class right now that's available for $89 for time management. Can you just give a snapshot of how important time management is for a leader?
Well, I would say I'm thinking it maybe is the most important thing, because it doesn't matter what you know. If you're not reliable and credible and get it done, and people are not interested in what you know, if you can't keep your promises and you don't follow up and you miss your medical appointment and the doctor says, I wish you'd have come in you haven't been here in 3 years, or we could have caught this earlier, or it's your reputation around how you manage your time. And I would say where you manage your time and where you spend your time will directly relate to the successes you have. You spend your time with your kids, that'll pay off. Spend your time with your family, that'll pay. I mean, when you really think about it, spend time in your health, that'll pay off. And are you getting the value? Same old story. Time is money. You spend your time. Are you getting value out of it like you would your investments? And and I'm not saying you can't lay on the couch. You can, but not all day.
Well, your book on time management is fantastic. And I know you talk about time management, obviously, in this class and your podcast. Lee has a podcast that he puts out weekly called Creating Magic. And I just highly recommend that you tie into that podcast, that you obviously buy the books. Lee, thank you for being here with us today. You've been outstanding. And I say this with all authenticity. I mean, I love that you and Priscilla have been married for 51 years. You are one of the greatest leaders that I know. I just appreciate
I'm going to tell her that.
Your authenticity, your realness, you're just, you're wise, and how you go about your leadership, and the writings in your book are outstanding. So I'm just appreciative.
Well, thank you.
Appreciative.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.